Hello everyone, this is FluffTCG here to show a deck profile for the new Bandai card game, Union Arena. What I'm here to show you today is a Bleach deck profile. It is for the color purple. In Union Arena, there are multiple colors. Currently there are blue, green, red, purple, and yellow. And for Bleach, the three colors are purple, yellow, and green. And then for Hunter, the colors are blue, purple, and green. So here today, I'm gonna show my deck list for what I will be playing for the foreseeable future, which is purple, and it is the Ichigo Rukia Byakuya package. So I'm going to do my best to explain all my cards, what they do, how they work, and hopefully you learn from this. So I'm gonna start here with my zeros. The zeros are extremely important in this game. I believe that if you run zeros, you should go for 12. That is the magic number. Sometimes you can go for 11, 10 maybe, but any less than that and you're really pushing it. So first batch of zeros is going to be the Byakuya zero for the raid targets. That's pretty much what it's for, energy generation for raid, and it has the get trigger. So if it's attacked in your life, you get to add it to your hand. Next four are going to be the Ichigo ones. Same exact kind of card, it's just Ichigo instead of Byakuya. Same trigger, same power, same energy value. And then the last of my zeros will be the Uryu zero. This one is extremely important because it allows you to cycle, essentially. It says on play, draw a card, and then place a card from hand into sideline, so it's a draw ditch. This is extremely crucial because you want to have as much in your sideline as possible in order for your top end to actually be able to pop off. So this is going to be the core zeros of the deck. You always want to see these and play these to build up your energy. This is the most self-explanatory portion of the deck list. From this point on, I'm going to show the non-triggers and the other options of the deck. So next two cards are going to be the Tenjiro. This card is extremely good because of its ability to sideline himself in order to salvage any purple card from your sideline and put it into your hand. This is really good late game when people remove your raid units, because you can just not only trash him to salvage it, but by putting him into your sideline, you're essentially filling up your sideline again in order to pop off further. I think this is probably one of the better non-engine cards in the entire deck just because of its universal usage. It's very good. I do recommend to play two of this. Even if you're not playing this specific deck list, I think all purple should be playing this card because of how good it is. The next couple of cards is the 2-drop Urahara. Pretty much every color has this ability. It's just when this character is active, it gains energy generation. You put this in the back, it becomes a 2 energy, and you can pretty much build it up earlier. That's the primary purpose for the card. You never really want to put this in the front line because it'll just die and you'll lose energy. It's completely not worth it. It does gain 1 energy in the front because it would be active, but you always want to have it 2 so you can play your primary bodies. And the last of them is the 3-drop Ichigo. Now this Ichigo is from the starter deck. It is not from the actual set, so you will need 2 copies of the starter deck to get your 4 copies outside of buying singles. You can see I have the super pre-release tag because I participated in it for the event. This Ichigo is a very good card because, as you can see, it has 2 energy, and it says on attack it's a 4,000, which is like the perfect number you want in Union Arena for a body on your board. So that's its primary purpose. You want to leave it in the back to generate energy. You want to put him in the front when you want to make damage. You typically do not want to raid on top of this Ichigo. You would rather do it on the zero Ichigo, just so that way this is another body on the board to attack with or to ramp. That's pretty much the non-tech stuff. This is all the small portion of the deck. So now we're going to get into the more important cards. So I'm going to go into the color triggers now, which I have 4. There's a hard limit of 4 per deck. The first 2 are the Ichigo. Actually, let me clean this up. We're doing this live, folks. I apologize. The 2 Ichigos right here. These are the first half of your color triggers in this deck. This Ichigo says, on play, look at the top card of your deck. Then either keep it there or you mill it into your sideline. The color effect is universal in every purple deck in the entire game. So all purple colors will say this effect, which says, play a purple character with 2 or less energy and 1 action point cost from your sideline and set it to active into your front line. So this is good because this can pretty much grab, in this case, for this deck, you could grab the Byakuyas, the Ichigos, pretty much all your raid targets. And most importantly, it's a body on the board. What you could also do with this is you can grab a Tenjiro also. It's probably one of the best hits for the trigger because next turn you just switch to resting and you salvage whatever you want. As for the other 2 color triggers, it is the Byakuya 3. This is very similar to the Ichigo right here. They both have the same stat line, except for when this swings. Same energy cost. The difference is that this Byakuya in particular says, on play, give an opponent's character minus 500 BP on the front line. This is very important for when I discuss the tech of the deck later, but just know that this is very good. You can argue that you could play 4 Byakuyas or 4 Ichigos, but for this package, since we're running both the Ichigo and the Byakuya top end, and we're also putting in the Rukia stuff, it's important that we go 50-50 on this. There's a couple instances you're going to see where it'll be half and half instead of a full playset, and that's because I think both of these cards are extremely good in their utilities, but at the end of the day, I do prefer having at least 2 more Ichigos and 2 more Byakuyas rather than 4, because I would rather they both have the same amount of raid targets for their top ends, but especially Ichigo, because Ichigo has 2 raid targets in this deck as opposed to Byakuya, who only has 1. But the reason I'm playing this Byakuya instead of 4 of this Ichigo is because the minus 500 is extremely important for a card I'm going to talk about shortly. So that's it for the color triggers. Next, we're going to discuss all the draw triggers in this deck and the mid game of the deck. So we're going to start here with the 3-cost Rukia. This Rukia is very good because it cycles on attack. It has a good baseline of 3,500. Unfortunately, as you may or may not be aware, the Japanese version of Union Arena for the first set of Bleach had a 0-cost Rukia that made it significantly easier to raid onto. That card has been removed from the English version of the game and will be placed in Volume 2, which will be the second set of Bleach. So for now, this is the only raid target that is in this deck. There is another Rukia that you could play from the starter deck, but I don't like to play it because I'm not fond of the fact that it requires you to remove stuff from your sideline. We only want to do that for our top end in order to get bodies KO'd. If you do it just to draw, which is what the other Rukia does, it's good, but then you run out of steam, and then you can't do your abilities, and you can't get rid of your opponent's board, and that's extremely important in this matchup. So that's the main purpose of the Rukias right here. Next is going to be what I think is one of the stronger cards in this deck, the Soifon 4-drop. This card is very, very good because of its ability that you can see here. Also, apologies for the camera shaking a lot. That's just, my desk's a little rickety. I'm trying to improve that. The activate main for Soifon says, if she's on the front, pay 1 action point. Once per turn, choose an opponent's character with 3,500 or less BP on their front line. At the start of your opponent's next turn, sideline the character and then switch this to resting and move it into your energy. So essentially what it does is you pick 1 character on your opponent's board. If that opponent's character survives, when you pass and their turn begins, that character is KO'd and Soifon goes from the front row into the back. Now, if they block with that character or it's removed through other means this turn, Soifon does not go to the back row because she needs to pretty much KO the opponent. So if it's not sidelined, she doesn't go back. That's because of the then keyword up here. So typically what your opponent will do if you target something with Soifon is that they'll either take the block, so that way she's stuck there and it's a wasted effect, or they intentionally let it die so that next turn the Soifon forces itself to retreat to the back row, and then the purple player will have at most 3 characters in the front, which can be very bad if you're in a position where they could go for game. Now, as you can see, 3,500 or less, this is exactly why you play this Byakuya. There are a lot of 4,000 power units in this game. All raid units, that's the most average number. There's also some SRs that have that power stat line. This reduces the power to 3,500. So you can play the Byakuya, and then you can activate Soifon's ability, and you can essentially just remove most characters in this game with ease. and I think it's fantastic. I think it's a very good combo. So that's why I want to run 2 Byakuyas. But as I mentioned, I can't run 4 because I need more Ichigos for the raid combos at the end. So that's my line of logic through it. But I think the Soy Phone, extremely good card. I definitely see a lot of people putting this into their deck now. Some are and some aren't. I had it at 4 initially, but I cut it down to 2 just because there was points in the game where you didn't really need her. She's a great tech and she's a good body, but ideally you would like to have as much 4Ks in the front as possible, so that way they don't block her swing with 3500 pretty much. Or rather, they don't want to, if they block it, it'll be a 4K and then she's a wasted attack, and then she gets to the back row because of her ability, and then you're free to take a hit. But in some niche situations, if your opponent only has 1 or 2 units in the front line, this is absolutely fantastic, especially in the early game. If your opponents will have a double blocker in the front, or if they have some units. So Hunter, for example, has an Uvogin that's 3500 that says, on your turn, it's a 5000. So this would activate, you could pop the Uvogin and pretty much get rid of that problem. And there's a lot of other cards that have the baseline 3500 where they'll maybe be a double blocker, or they could be on attack, gain 1000. So she's really, really good for getting rid of that as a utility card, and I think she's fantastic in this deck. And now, the meat and potatoes of the deck is going to be the raids. 2 Rukia raids. Same reason I mentioned before. I don't want to have 4 of this because I only have 4 targets, and then it gets too cluttered in my deck, and there's only so much space. So, Rukia's ability, when you raid, draw 3, discard 2. Absolutely incredible card. Like, one of the best cards in this color. It's just unfortunate that there's not many raid targets for her in the English version. The activate main is place a card from your hand to the sideline, so discard a card, and then give a character on your side of the field 500 extra BP. And this is good because this turns Soy Phone into a 4000, for example. This is really, really good for obviously cleaning out your hand if you don't want to see certain things, good for filling up your sideline, and it has a 4000 base power, so I think this card is genuinely amazing. If you do manage to get both on the field, you can pump something up 5000, so that way if your opponent has a high top end, like green is very common to have a 5000 power unit, it would at least have to match it. So you could do 5000 with impact, and then they just have to take it. But primarily, this is a utility card also, just to fill up your trash and see the better cards in your deck. Extremely good card. I really wish I could play 4 of this, but I can't do that in the current set, just because there's just not that many Rukia options, and I don't want to make space for less Ichigo raids or less Byakuya raids. So, amazing card, but you can only do so much. The next raids are the 2 Ichigos from the starter decks. This raid unit, very good because it has a 4 cost as opposed to the other Ichigo, which I'll show shortly, which has a 5 cost, which is pretty much the main beater in this deck. The activate main of this Ichigo is to place 4 cards into removal from sideline in order to draw and give it impact. This card is very good at closing out games, just because of the fact that if you play this and you do the ability and they have 1 life, it's very rare that they have a way to block this, especially if the color doesn't have a 5k unit. So this card is very good. Even outside of that, again, 4k baseline, that's the magic number. You want all your beaters to have power at this level, no less, because that way your opponent can't block easily and they have to commit either something on the board or take damage. The draw is good, the impact is better. This is pretty much your I'm going for game card. If you have both of these, you can try to rush your opponent, and hopefully it works out in your favor and they don't hit a final trigger, but that's what this card is primarily used for. Next cards, the ace of the deck, the 5 energy Ichigo. This card is probably single-handedly what makes Purple Bleach one of, if not the best deck in the format at current. The raid for this card reads, place the top 2 cards of your deck into your sideline, and then place any number of cards from your sideline into your removal area. Choose up to 1 character on your opponent's front line. It loses 500 BP for each card placed into your removed area with this ability until the end of turn. So what does that mean? Let's say they have a 5000 BP unit on the board. Like in Green's case, they may have the 7 cost Yamamoto. you can play this Ichigo, put 10 cards from your sideline into the removal area and KO it. This card is unbelievably good. If your sideline is big enough, it pretty much just reads KO anything. Now be wary that this does reduce BP, and there are certain cards, for example, there is a 4-cost Kenpachi in Bleach. It's a green card. That card states this card's BP cannot be reduced, so this card is useless against that. But that being said, this card can pretty much get rid of anything. If you have enough trash and you've reduced power this turn through other means that I'll explain shortly, these cards are so good at winning the game also. Just because you can get rid of a pesky blocker, you can use these to get rid of a raid or an impact nullify, so that way your impacts can go through and you can still deal damage. This gets rid of boss monsters. This card pretty much does everything. This card is unbelievably good. And I'm using wrong terminology like monsters and characters and creatures, and I play too many card games, clearly. But this is the ace. This card is the card of this deck. It is borderline perfect. I love this card. It's my favorite card in the set. It's so good at what it does. It really just solves all your problems for the most part. And I think that this card is so good that always 4, never less. Even when you play other engines, always 4 of this Ichigo. You're shooting yourself in the foot by not playing this card. That's how good it is. It's just too good. And for the last raid, we have the Byakuya raid. This card is also amazing. So this card says when you play it via raid, you can remove 2 cards from sideline to removal and give your opponent's entire board in the front minus 1000 BP. Then he has an activate main where you can put 3 cards into removal from sideline to give him impact until end of turn. And when he attacks, you can remove a card from sideline to give something minus 1000. This is very good because the global minus 1k turns 5000s into 4000s, so they can no longer block. But also, it's such a good number because in this game, board control is so important for this deck that you really want to just reduce as much power as possible. You ideally want to play this and already have a Swipe 1 on the board too, for example, because then, again, you can pop 4000 or less with both this Byakuya as well as the other Byakuya. You can do this Ichigo to make the character down to 1000, then play this Byakuya and get rid of it, or even down to 2000, so they can play this Byakuya, raid into it, minus 1000, attack, minus 1000 again. This card is excellent. It's also a 4 of. This and Ichigo are the main 2 finishers of the deck because they just win you the game, to put it simply. They wipe out the board, they pretty much deal with everything, and again, you can salvage these with the 1-drop. So at the end of the day, you should always see at least 1 or 2 of each of these per game, whether you're drawing through it or you're milling it. Just be careful about what you remove from play because those cards are gone forever. And now onto our events, the big meat and potatoes of the deck. So firstly, 2 Getsuga Tenshos. Why not 4? I'll explain that shortly. The Getsuga Tensho is simple. It sidelines a 3000 or less on your opponent's front line. If Ichigo's on the field, it's 5000 or less. This is specifically to KO units that you either cannot get rid of because you don't have enough in your sideline, or that they cannot have their BP reduced. So again, green Kenpachi in Bleach can't get its power reduced. This bypasses that and just sidelines it right away. This is specifically why you run it. There are certain cards in this game that you just can't reduce the power of, so it's best for you to just kill them with this, move on, play the rest of your turn out. Now the other 2 specials is Byakuya's. The Senbon Sakura Kageyoshi. It's a 4-2. If Byakuya's on your board, it's a 4-1. This card says give an opponent's character minus 3000 BP and another one minus 1000 BP. So what does that mean? It means with this Byakuya on your board and then you play this, you can KO a 4000. If you play this and then swing with this, you can get rid of a 5000, you can get rid of a 4000, You can get rid of a 2000. You can pretty much get rid of anything with these 2 units, or with the unit and with the event. If you have the Ichigo on top of that, because you could play all 3 of these in one turn technically, you could very easily, if this is in your hand, these 3 cards, you could clear the opponent's entire front line in one turn and still have a full board to attack with. Because these can do negative 4,000 to 2 things. This can do negative 2,000. And that's not even implying that you have Bankai in your hand to do more, raid into an Ichigo to reduce even more cost. It's very good. The only reason you don't run 4 is because, as I said before, there are certain cards that you just can't reduce the BP of. So just a straight up KO is just better in some instances. I feel like that's just the way to go with this deck. And the last few cards, I'm sure you know what decks look like in this game. The 4 Bankais. It's a final trigger, so if you would lose on that hit, if you reveal it, you gain a life. But the main thing is the ability. It costs 1, but it activates 2 of your AP cards. So it's basically a +1 to keep doing more stuff. Every set has this card. Every deck should run 4 of this card. It's just too good. It gives you so much versatility, so much advantage, so much everything in this deck. Again, it lets you play more Byakuyas, play more Ichigos, play more everything. It's just too good. And essentially, that is the full deck profile. If you want to see the full deck, because unfortunately I didn't lay it all out, luckily we do have a wonderful website, which is EXBurst.dev/UA. That website pretty much has a full database of all the Union Arena cards. It's a fantastic website, and in a few moments I'm going to do a really bad cut, and I'm going to show the website and show you some sample hands of the deck so you can see how the opening hands look like and pretty much how to play the deck properly. So thanks for watching. Hello, we're here on EXBurst.dev, and again, this is the database that has all the English cards released in Union Arena. They also have a website for Dragon Ball. They also have a website for the Asia sets. But as you can see here, this is the deck that I showed, pretty much 1 for 1. And we are going to go through some starting hands. And I know this is a very long video, so if you're using this to learn the deck, or if you're using this to just put on the background, thanks for being here. So let's look at some starting hands and we'll see what we can work with. Nothing here. That's this game in a nutshell. We're gonna have to restart this hand. It happens with every color. All right, much, much better. This is actually unbelievably good. So let's say we'll go first, right? We'll play the Ichigo, we'll pass. They'll do whatever, our turn. Draw a card. Cool. Play the Uryu, because you're at 2 action points now, to draw a card and discard a card. At this point, I would say just discard the Ichigo. You already have one in the back line, there's no reason to play the second copy. And then you can play Byakuya, and you pass. Then they're at 2, again, and they do whatever they gotta do. Your turn, go again. Now you have 3 in the back line. So what you can do here is play Rukia in the front, play Ichigo in the back, and then play Soifun in the front. That way you have 2 3500s. So if your opponent wanted to move stuff up that was small, just to smack you and deal damage, then that's their prerogative. But at that point, the point for putting this right here in the back is at least now you have 5, so you can raid into Byakuya next turn. So then they do their turn, you go again, and look at that, beautiful. It's beautiful. You could go crazy this turn. You could go raid Rukia, 1, 2, 3, looks good. Discard Byakuya 0, discard Ichigo 0. Or you could keep either one if you want to see another raid target. So you could get rid of the Uryu and this Ichigo, for example. Raid the Byakuya, activate Soifun ability. And that's pretty much how this battle will go out. Hopefully you have good life that you can add to your hand, etc. So let's try another hand. See, the problem is that you would lose this, but at the same time, if you can't play anything, it's really bad. You ideally want to have 2 zeros at your hand at all times. Otherwise, you could draw one like I just did here if you got lucky, but you might not want to risk that because as you see here, everything costs 3 and you have no double energy generation. So you're kind of stuck. So we'll mulligan here, and perfect, much, much better. can start, play Byakuya Pass. On your next turn, draw a card. It's Ichigo. You can play the 1-drop Ichigo, look at the top card of your deck. You can mill the Uryu and put it in the sideline. And then you can play a second Ichigo and do it again. And I would say leave this Rukia on top. Then you pass, your turn. Oh, fantastic. What you want to do at this point, Rukia in the front, this Byakuya in the back, and Siphon in the front. Just so that way you have 5 energy to go into any raid targets in this game. For the Byakuya, if you can't do the combo with Byakuya and Siphon, or there's nothing on the board to contest it, but you're still really low on energy, I recommend just playing the Byakuya and not do the effect, just because you need energy. This is a deck that needs minimum 4 energy, but you want to always stay at 5. So your ideal back row should be a 2-1-1-1, or a 2-2-1 or nothing, or a 1-1-1-2. Just something that lets you play the game, essentially. And in this game, you want to be able, when you raid in the back and move up, you want to be able to replace those units, which is also why I don't recommend raiding off of the Byakuya here, or the 3-cost Ichigo, which I'm trying to find here. Wow, these are really good draws. Wow, look at that. Even the Rukia is here. So, and this, do not raid these unless you are trying to go for game. If they have 1 life and you have this in the front, and they have a full board, you can go into this door right here, on top of this, do the ability, go for game, and you're in a good spot. I'll do one more restart draw just to get a taste of how the deck works. This is a good enough hand to keep. And this is where you can do really stupid stuff with Bankai, which I'll show in a moment. So turn 1, play Uryu. Wow, really good. I don't think you need another one of these Ichigos. You can either get rid of an Ichigo here, or you could maybe get rid of a Bankai, but I don't recommend it, because Bankai can get very silly with what you're able to do. So let's say we slide on this Ichigo right here. Pass, your turn, whatever. Draw, you go Urahara to this Ichigo. Keep this in your hand, you keep this top of your deck. You definitely want this Embon Sakura. Pass, your turn again. So your back row should be this Uryu, Ichigo, this Urahara. So you should have 4 energy in the back. So what you can do, pay 1 to draw. Sometimes it doesn't matter, but in this case, you have the 4 Ichigo and the 5 Ichigo. So there's nothing wrong with paying to draw. It's actually really good. But since you have Bankai, it's essentially free, because you're going to get the energy back regardless, or rather the action point. And at this point, this is an issue where you have 1 Ichigo, but you have 3 raid Ichigos. Of course, if they attack you and your life has a get trigger Ichigo that you can put to your hand, then this doesn't matter, because this is only showing the hand, it doesn't show life or anything. Then you're in a good spot. You could go at 4, you could play the 4 Ichigos and just have a board presence early. You could play the Byakuya and have a 3k on the board, and you pretty much just play it out. I think this deck is really strong. I would say the only time it really struggles is into decks where there are a lot of 4k bodies or higher. So like green Bleach, green Hunter, sometimes even blue Hunter. If they have a lot of ways to get rid of your board, it gets difficult. Also, the mirror can be very difficult too, because you're both just popping each other's stuff non-stop. There's no real out to it. You're just gonna have to play your card strategically, keep your stuff in the rear, and don't anxiously move it up, because even if you raid the 5 Ichigo in the back, you can still do the effect. It doesn't have to be in the front. So if sometimes people will raid in the back and leave it there because they want to protect the body from potentially being KO'd, or if you hit an extra trigger, they get rid of your unit. In damage, that's also frustrating. Or I guess it's not an extra trigger, it's a special trigger. I'm learning new things every day still. But I know this wasn't comprehensive. This is a very lax and laid-back deck profile. I didn't want to make it super serious. I just kind of wanted to show the deck, show why I love it, show how to play it a little bit. And if you can learn from this deck and build it, if you want to improve upon it, make adjustments to it, you are free to do so. I will more than happy to be told, this deck sucks, you should do this instead or that instead. There's a lot of good purple Bleach decks. People are playing the Renji engine. They're doing Byakuya Renji, they're doing Ichigo Renji, they're doing 4 Rukias with 8 Rukias that are not the starter deck one, and 1 in my deck. The thing I love about this game is that you can pretty much just do whatever. The world is your oyster as long as you match color requirements and sets. And at the end of the day, I hope this helps. I hope you build something like this or close to it. If you want to build decks, again, I will put this website in the description along with where my deck profile is exactly. And that's pretty much it. Thank you so much for being a part of this, and it was a lot of fun. And that's it.